An alien war fleet picked one single week to invade a city on Earth. The week of the Calgary Stampede. 10 days of rodeo, chuckwagon races, and men who ride angry bulls for fun. The invaders thought they found the easiest target in the galaxy. They were wrong in ways that would follow them across the stars. If you love a good underdog story, hit that like button, subscribe if you are new here, and drop a comment telling me where you would want aliens to land next. Now let us step into the week Calgary changed the invasion playbook forever. High Commander Weston Cade of the 3rd Expansion Fleet had studied 900 worlds before this one. Every report on his console said the same thing about the target city, Calgary, Alberta. Population large enough to matter, infrastructure strong enough to be useful, and according to the fleet's cultural scan. A population currently distracted by what the data labeled a regional gathering event. The scan called it low risk. The scan was reading crowd size, not what the crowd was made of. Commander Cade did not know the event was the Calgary Stampede. He did not know that for 10 days every July, the city filled with ranchers, rodeo riders, chuckwagon drivers, and thousands of visitors who considered a belt buckle a personal trophy. His scan saw open fields, wooden fences, animal pens, and large crowds standing close together. His scan read that as vulnerable. His scan was very wrong. Down on the ground, none of this mattered yet to a man named Colton Briggs. Colton was 28, raised on a cattle ranch outside the city, and currently standing in the chuckwagon paddock at Stampede Park with a rope in one hand and a coffee in the other. Colton had raced chuckwagons for 6 years. He knew horses the way most people knew their own name. He also had a bad habit of noticing things before anyone else did, which was exactly why he was the first person in Calgary to look up and see a shape in the sky that did not belong there. "That ain't a blimp," Colton said to his teammate, a stocky man named Duke Harmon who was tightening a harness buckle. Duke did not even look up. "Then it's a weather balloon. Or a drone doing traffic footage for the news. Duke, it's got no wings." Duke finally looked up. The shape hung low over the Stampede grounds, dark, smooth, and completely silent. It was the kind of silence that felt wrong, the kind that made the hair on your arms stand up before your brain understood why. Within minutes, the first alien recon craft had touched down outside the city limits, near a working ranch owned by a man named Walter Boone. Walter was 61 years old, had a hip replacement, 3 grown kids, and a personal rule that anything walking onto his land uninvited got dealt with before he asked questions. Walter did not know he was about to become one of the first humans in recorded history to physically restrain an alien soldier using a coil of rope and mild irritation. Commander Cade's recon team wore stealth plating designed to bend light and mask heat signatures. It had worked against 6 other civilizations. It had never been tested against a rancher who could hear a coyote from 400 yards away in the dark. The lead scout stepped over a fence wire connected to a bell, the same trick ranchers had used for 100 years, and the bell rang clean across the property. Walter did not shout. He did not panic. He simply reached for the rope hanging by his back door, the same rope he used every single day of his life, and walked outside like a man checking on a loose calf. What happened next would later be described online as the first recorded human victory of the war, even though nobody in Calgary knew a war had started yet. Back at Stampede Park, Colton and Duke were not the only ones who noticed the sky. Word moved through the grounds fast, the way it always does in a crowd built from ranch families, rodeo riders, and a stadium full of people who had grown up trusting their gut over official explanations. A retired Mountie named Harold Reyes, working Stampede security that week, radioed his team with 4 words that would later become a local legend. "Something is not right." Nobody knew yet how right he was. High above the city, Commander Cade watched his tactical display fill with confusion. His recon team had gone silent, not destroyed. Silent, that was worse. Destroyed meant resistance. Silent meant something had happened that his sensors could not classify, and Cade had learned a long time ago that unclassified events were the ones that ended careers. "Report status," Cade ordered. Static answered him. Then faintly through the recon team's open channel came a voice that was not alien at all. It was calm, low, and distinctly human. "Y'all picked the wrong week." Cade stared at the display. His officers stared at him. Somewhere below, in a rodeo arena built for bucking broncos and bull riders, the greatest miscalculation in his fleet's history was only just beginning. And the people of Calgary had no idea they were about to turn a sci-fi invasion into the loudest rodeo the galaxy had ever heard of. Walter Boone's recon team situation ended almost exactly the way every trespasser situation on his ranch had ended for the last 30 years. Except this time the trespassers were 9 feet tall and green. The lead scout, cloaked in stealth armor that bent light around his body, took one step past the fence line and felt something loop around his ankle before his sensors even registered a threat. Walter had thrown that rope from 40 feet away without breaking stride. The scout hit the ground so hard his own translator activated on impact. "Unprovoked assault," the translator crackled. "This violates conduct protocol." Walter did not know what a conduct protocol was. He looped the rope twice more, the same motion he used on calves during branding season, and had the alien hog tied before the creature's second leg finished twitching. "Son," Walter said, kneeling down to look the alien in its 4 eyes, "you're on private property." A second scout tried to activate his cloaking field to retreat. Walter's dog, an old blue heeler named Scout, who had spent his entire life chasing things that moved wrong, was already airborne. The second alien went down face first into a water trough. By the time Walter's neighbor arrived with a flashlight and a shotgun he did not even need, all 3 recon soldiers were hog-tied in a neat row beside the barn. Looking less like an elite invasion unit and more like calves waiting for branding day. Walter took a photo on his phone, more out of habit than excitement, and sent it to his son with the caption, "Found some trespassers." Might be foreign. He had no idea how right that word would turn out to be. Meanwhile, at Stampede Park, the first wave of the actual invasion force was already descending, and Commander Cade had made a decision that would define the entire operation. He ordered his soldiers to land directly inside the chuckwagon paddock, reasoning that a wide open dirt field with minimal structures was the safest possible landing zone. What his scan failed to calculate was that the wide open dirt field currently contained 40 trained chuckwagon horses, 6 professional drivers, and a livestock population that did not respond well to strangers dropping out of the sky in armored suits. Colton Briggs was checking his lead horse's harness when the first landing craft touched down 30 yards away. The ramp lowered with a hiss of steam. Armored soldiers marched out in formation, weapons raised, moving with practiced precision meant to project total dominance. The horses did not care about dominance. The horses cared about the loud metal thing that had just appeared out of nowhere, and they reacted exactly the way spooked horses always react. Colton's team horses reared, pulled hard against their lines, and one line snapped clean. A gelding named Ranger bolted straight through the alien formation, clipping 2 soldiers and sending them sprawling into the dirt. "Unidentified livestock showing aggressive behavior," one alien soldier shouted into his communicator. "That ain't livestock being aggressive," Duke Harmon yelled back, grabbing a lead rope. "That's Tuesday." Colton did not wait for instructions from anyone. He grabbed the nearest rope off the paddock fence, the same 12-foot lariat he used every single race, and moved toward the alien soldier struggling to get up from the dirt. The soldier raised his weapon. Colton threw the rope before the weapon ever cleared its holster. The loop caught the soldier clean around the shoulders. Colton planted his boots the way he had 10,000 times before and pulled. The alien hit the ground hard enough to rattle his own armor plating. "Ride him," someone shouted from the paddock fence, half joking, half serious, the way people shout things during chaos they do not fully understand yet. Colton looked at the downed alien soldier, looked at the rope in his hand, and made a decision that would end up on every news channel in North America within 12 hours. He climbed onto the alien's back the exact same way he mounted a bucking horse at the start of a race, one hand gripping the harness of the soldier's own equipment, and held on as the creature thrashed and screamed through its translator about violated protocols and unauthorized restraint. Duke could not stop laughing long enough to help. "He's riding it. He's actually riding it." The alien soldier bucked and spun, dragging Colton through the dirt exactly the way a green-broke horse would. Except this one had a plasma rifle strapped to its back, and was shouting words in a language the translator kept mistranslating into panicked, broken English. Cease this immediately. This is not combat protocol." "Rodeo ain't protocol either, buddy," Colton shouted back, adjusting his grip. "It's Tuesday afternoon in Calgary." By the time 3 more soldiers arrived to help their comrade, half the chuckwagon paddock crew had grabbed ropes off the fence rail. And what had started as a precision, alien landing had turned into the strangest rodeo event in the history of the sport. Live streamed by at least 6 phones held by stunned Stampede visitors, who had absolutely no idea how to explain what they were filming. Commander Cade, watching secondary drone footage from orbit, said only one word: "Impossible." His tactical officer had no better answer to give him. By the time Commander Cade pulled his drone feed back for a wider view of the paddock, he understood one critical fact his scans had never accounted for. The humans below were not simply resisting. They were treating the invasion like an event they already had procedures for. Colton finally released his grip and rolled off the alien soldier's back, landing in the dirt the same way he had landed off 1,000 horses before. The soldier staggered upright, armor scratched, dignity destroyed, and immediately radioed for extraction in a voice that had lost all of its earlier confidence. "This location is not secure," the soldier said. "Repeat, this location is not secure." Duke Harmon grabbed him from behind before the words even finished. Wrapping a second rope around the soldier's arms with the same speed he used tying off a calf during branding. Within 90 seconds, 4 alien soldiers were sitting in the dirt of the chuckwagon paddock, tied, disarmed, and surrounded by rodeo crew members who were still trying to process what had just happened. That was when the second and much larger wave arrived. Commander Cade, frustrated by his recon failure, ordered a full deployment directly onto the rodeo grounds, believing overwhelming numbers would settle the matter his scouts could not. 12 landing craft descended over Stampede Park at once, dropping soldiers near the food vendor row, the midway, and the main grandstand entrance, where thousands of visitors were still arriving for the afternoon rodeo show. What Cade did not understand, and what none of his intelligence data had prepared him for, was that a rodeo grandstand crowd does not scatter the way a normal city crowd does. It organizes. Fast. Harold Reyes, the retired Mountie working security, had already moved half his team toward the chuckwagon paddock the moment the first landing craft touched down. When the second wave arrived near the grandstand, his radio lit up with calls from vendors, ride operators, and rodeo staff, all reporting the same thing in different words. Something had landed. Something was armed. Something needed to be handled before the afternoon show started, because nobody in that stadium was going to let an alien invasion cancel the Saddle Bronc finals. A chuckwagon driver named Miller Pratt, 44 years old, 3-time Stampede champion, and a man who considered his wagon horses closer family than most of his actual relatives, watched an alien squad march toward the barns where his 4 lead horses were stabled. Miller did not call for help. Miller grabbed a horse blanket, a lead rope, and walked straight toward them. "You are approaching a restricted operation," an alien officer announced through his translator, raising a hand toward Miller. "Son, you are approaching my horses," Miller answered, "and that is a mistake you are only going to make once." The officer did not understand the warning until Miller's lead horse, a massive gelding named Outlaw, who had once thrown a professional rider clean over a fence rail, caught the officer's movement and reacted the only way Outlaw knew how to react to something unfamiliar standing too close. The kick landed square in the chest plate and sent the alien officer flying backward into a stack of empty feed barrels. Behind Miller, 3 more chuckwagon drivers had already grabbed harness lines, wagon poles, and anything within reach. What followed over the next several minutes was later described by one Stampede visitor's viral video as Cowboys treating an alien invasion like just another chore before the show started. One alien soldier, separated from his unit near the barns, made the single worst decision of his short career. He climbed into the back of an empty chuckwagon to escape a charging horse, believing the wooden structure would provide cover. It did not. Miller Pratt, seeing the soldier climb in, simply closed the wagon gate, hitched his team, and gave the signal to run the practice lap he had already scheduled for that afternoon. The chuckwagon shot forward at full speed, the trapped alien soldier screaming through his translator with every bounce and turn, his voice cracking through the open channel back to Commander Cade's bridge. "This vehicle is uncontrolled. I am inside an uncontrolled vehicle. I require immediate extraction." Cade's officers stared at their monitors in disbelief, as the tracking signal from one of their own soldiers bounced violently around the chuckwagon track at speeds their own scans had not predicted a wheeled Earth vehicle could achieve. "Report your status," Cade demanded. The answer that came back would later be quoted by two different galactic intelligence agencies as the single strangest combat report in Dominion history. "Status is Chuckwagon. I am the Chuckwagon." Cade closed the channel. Around him, his bridge crew said nothing because there was nothing left to say that would not sound insane. Down on the ground, the practice lap ended exactly on schedule. Miller Pratt opened the wagon gate, looked at the dazed, thoroughly rattled alien soldier curled up against the wooden boards, and offered him a single piece of advice. "Next time, stay off the wagon." The soldier did not answer. The soldier had stopped speaking entirely. Above the city, Commander Cade stared at his tactical display, watching two of his squads reduced to hostages of rope. One soldier physically ridden like a bucking horse in front of a live audience, and another soldier's status logged permanently in fleet records as Chuckwagon. His invasion had been running for less than 90 minutes. He had not yet seen the grandstand. The grandstand crowd at Stampede Park had one advantage no alien scan could measure. It was not one crowd. It was thousands of people who had spent their entire lives around livestock, machinery, and controlled chaos. All packed into one place at the exact moment, an invasion decided to test itself against them. Commander Cade, determined to salvage the operation, ordered a direct show of force near the main arena entrance, believing a large, coordinated formation would finally establish the fear his fleet needed. 40 soldiers marched out in perfect lines, weapons raised, moving toward the grandstand gates where the afternoon rodeo crowd was still filing in. A man named Garrett Cole, 36 years old, a bull-riding announcer who had spent 15 years learning how to read a crowd and control a room with nothing but his voice, was standing near the arena's sound system when the soldiers appeared. Garrett did not run. Garrett grabbed the closest working microphone and did the only thing he knew how to do under pressure. He announced it like an event. "Folks, looks like we've got some new competitors joining us this afternoon." Garrett's voice boomed across the grandstand speakers, calm, confident, and completely unbothered. "Never seen gear quite like that before, but we'll see how they do in the arena." The crowd, still not entirely sure what they were looking at, laughed nervously, then began filming. Then began moving, not away from the soldiers, but toward the arena rail, treating the entire scene like the strangest halftime show of their lives. Cade's soldiers had trained for fear. They had trained for panic. They had never trained for an audience. "They are recording us," one soldier reported, confusion clear in his translated voice. "They are not retreating. Continue advance," the squad leader ordered, though even his own confidence had started to crack. That confidence shattered completely when the arena gates opened for the scheduled saddle bronc event, releasing a line of powerful, fully grown rodeo horses straight into the open grounds, exactly as their handlers had planned before any of this started. Nobody stopped the schedule. Nobody thought to. The rodeo ran on its own momentum, and that momentum happened to include half a dozen furious, freshly released bucking horses charging directly into the alien formation. What followed was chaos in its purest form. Soldiers scattered, formation broken, weapons firing wildly into open air as the horses crashed through their ranks with the same raw unpredictability that had ended 100 rodeo careers before. One soldier was lifted clean off his feet by a horse named Widowmaker, a name the animal had earned honestly over 6 seasons of throwing professional riders. Garrett kept narrating the entire time because stopping felt more dangerous than continuing. "And there goes Widowmaker, folks, doing what Widowmaker does best. That's a full toss that's got some serious airtime on it," the crowd roared. Not out of malice, but out of the same instinct that made people cheer during any rodeo event. An instinct that did not know how to switch off, just because the competitor happened to be from another planet. Commander Cade watched his formation collapse in real time from orbit, and for the first time since the invasion began, he asked a question his officers could not answer. "Are they entertained?" His intelligence officer hesitated before responding. "Sir, cross-referencing local behavior patterns." This crowd response is consistent with what the humans classify as a good show. Cade said nothing for a long moment. Down below, his soldiers were being thrown, dragged, and chased across an open field by animals his scans had classified as low-threat livestock. All while thousands of humans filmed the entire event and cheered like it was scheduled entertainment. That was when Harold Reyes made his move. Harold had spent the last 20 minutes organizing security staff, ride operators, and off-duty rodeo hands into something resembling a plan, not because he had a manual for this situation, but because 30 years of crowd control experience did not simply disappear because the threat had 4 eyes instead of 2. He led a group of a dozen men toward the alien squad leader, still trying to re-establish formation near the arena rail. "Sir," Harold said, using the same flat, procedural tone he had used on drunk troublemakers for 3 decades, "you're going to need to come with us." The squad leader raised his weapon, more out of instinct than actual intent. Harold did not flinch. He had disarmed men twice this creature's size before, men who wanted to hurt him far more than a confused alien soldier currently surrounded by cheering strangers and rampaging horses. "Put it down," Harold said simply. The soldier looked at the chaos around him. The horses, the crowd, the announcer still narrating his humiliation to thousands of people, and made the first genuinely intelligent decision of the entire operation. He put the weapon down. Commander Cade, watching his last organized unit surrender without a single shot fired by the humans, finally gave the order he never imagined giving on what was supposed to be the easiest planet in the sector. Pull back the ground teams, full retreat to orbit. It was not going to be that simple. Not with what was still waiting for his fleet near the food vendor row, where a woman named Darlene Cassidy was about to make the entire Dominion regret ever hearing the word Calgary. Darlene Cassidy ran the busiest mini donut stand on the entire Stampede grounds, a fact she reminded every customer at least once during their order. She was 52 years old, had worked the same stand for 18 years, and had a personal rule that nothing, whether drunks or apparently alien soldiers, was allowed to interrupt her fryer during peak lunch rush. When 6 retreating alien soldiers stumbled into the food vendor row, trying to regroup after the disaster at the grandstand, they made the mistake of walking directly through Darlene's line. "Excuse me," the lead soldier said through his translator, still trying to salvage some shred of authority. "This area is now under temporary Dominion control." Darlene did not even look up from her fryer basket. "Sweetheart, you just cut in front of 40 people who have been waiting 15 minutes for donuts." The soldier hesitated, clearly unprepared for a response that ignored the entire concept of interplanetary conquest in favor of a lunch line grievance. "We require this location for tactical regrouping." Darlene set down her tongs, wiped her hands on her apron, and looked at the soldier the exact same way she looked at anyone who tried to skip her line during the busiest week of her year. "You're gonna require an ambulance if you don't get out of my line." What happened next spread across every phone in the vicinity within seconds. Darlene grabbed the nearest object within reach, a fully loaded tray of cinnamon sugar mini donuts, and swung it directly into the lead soldier's helmet with enough force to knock him sideways into a nearby popcorn stand. The vendor at the popcorn stand, a college student named Chase Whitfield who had absolutely no combat training and every bit of 19-year-old adrenaline, grabbed the closest thing available, a bag of unpopped kernels, and started throwing it like ammunition. Within 30 seconds, the entire food vendor row had joined in, not out of coordinated strategy, but out of the same instinctive defense of territory that made every single one of them protective of their stand, their line, and their livelihood during the 1 week of the year that made their entire business. Soldiers were pelted with corn dogs, hit with serving trays, and chased by teenagers wielding lemonade pitchers like weapons. One soldier, cornered near the ice cream truck, surrendered simply by raising both hands and saying the only word his translator could manage clearly. Truce, the vendor with the ice cream scoop did not lower her weapon, but she did stop swinging it. Above the chaos, Commander Cade watched his retreating soldiers get overrun not by an organized militia, not by trained combatants, but by food vendors defending lunch lines with kitchen equipment. His tactical officer's voice cracked slightly as he delivered the update. "Sir, we are logging our forces as defeated by, confectionery staff." Cade closed his eyes. "Do not log it that way. What would you like it logged as, sir?" Cade thought about the ropes, the horses, the wagon, the grandstand crowd. And now a woman armed with a donut tray who had ended a soldier's combat career in under 4 seconds. "Log it as unforeseen local resistance," Cade said quietly, "and begin full fleet withdrawal." That order came too late for one final humiliation. As the last landing craft attempted an emergency evacuation from the paddock area, Colton Briggs, still covered in dirt from his earlier ride, watched the ship struggle to lift off through a cloud of loose hay and spooked horses still circling the grounds. He grabbed a coiled rope off the fence one final time, more out of stubborn instinct than any real plan, and threw it toward the landing gear as the craft began to rise. It should not have worked. It had no business working. But the rope caught, the ship's ascent lurched sideways under the sudden weight and resistance, and for one brief, glorious moment broadcast live across a dozen phone videos. An actual alien spacecraft was slowed down by a chuckwagon lariat before the line finally snapped under the strain. The crowd's reaction was instant and thunderous. It was not fear. It was the same sound Stampede Park made every single year when a rider stayed on for the full 8 seconds, when a chuckwagon crossed the finish line first. When the thing everyone came to see finally happened in front of them. Commander Cade watched his final ship clear the atmosphere, battered, humiliated, and short several soldiers who would need considerable time to explain their experience to Fleet Command. He looked at the tactical display one last time, at the little dot on the map still labeled Calgary, and made the only decision that made any sense left in his entire career. "Mark this location," he said slowly. "Restricted." "Permanently?" "For how long, sir?" Cade thought about the rope, the horses, the wagon, the donuts, and the sound of an entire stadium cheering while his fleet retreated in pieces. "Forever," Cade said. "Mark it forever." By sundown, Stampede Park looked almost exactly the way it always did at the end of a rodeo day, except for the scorch marks near the barns. A dented alien helmet hanging from the announcer's booth as a makeshift trophy, and a slightly crushed popcorn stand that Chase Whitfield had already turned into the most popular photo spot on the entire grounds. Nobody called it a battle, nobody called it a war. By the time the evening news crews arrived, the people of Calgary had already decided, without ever discussing it out loud, that the entire event was simply the most unforgettable afternoon in Stampede history, and they intended to talk about it exactly that way for the rest of their lives. Walter Boone's 3 captured recon soldiers were eventually handed over to Canadian authorities, who had absolutely no protocol prepared for processing extraterrestrial prisoners, and who spent most of the first meeting simply staring at the paperwork requirements before deciding to treat it, for lack of a better option, like an unusual immigration case. Walter, for his part, went home, fed his cattle, and told his wife over dinner that he had, in fact, caught some trespassers earlier, and yes, they were exactly the kind of trespassers she was thinking of. Colton Briggs became, almost overnight, the single most requested interview in the city. Every news outlet wanted to know what it felt like to ride an alien soldier the same way he rode a bucking horse. Colton's answer never changed no matter who asked. "Felt about the same, honestly. Just held on and did what I always do." Miller Pratt's chuckwagon, the same one that had carried a terrified alien soldier around the practice track at full speed, was retired from competition and placed on display near the front gate of Stampede Park the following year, with a small plaque that read simply "Restricted Cargo, no extraterrestrial passengers." Darlene Cassidy's mini donut stand became a minor tourist attraction all on its own. People traveled from other provinces just to buy a bag of donuts from, as the local paper put it, the woman who ended an alien soldier's combat career with a serving tray. Darlene never let the attention slow down her line. She still reminded every single customer that she had been running that stand for 18 years, now with the added detail that she had also, technically, participated in Earth's first successful planetary defense. Garrett Cole's live announcing of the entire grandstand incident became one of the most replayed pieces of audio in the country that year, largely because he never once broke character. Treating an actual alien assault the exact same way he treated every wild ride he had called for 15 years straight. When asked later why he never panicked, Garrett shrugged and said the job was the same no matter what climbed into the arena. "My job's to call what I see," Garrett said. Didn't matter if it had 4 eyes. Still had to call it. High Commander Weston Cade's fleet limped back through hyperspace with a report that would eventually become required reading among Dominion intelligence officers. Not because of its content, but because of how many times the phrase unforeseen local resistance appeared across a single document. The planet Earth remained on the restricted list. The city of Calgary received its own separate designation, one that translated roughly into, "Do not return during the 10-day period, ever under any circumstances." Back on the ground, the Stampede continued exactly as scheduled for the remainder of its 10 days, because that was simply what the Stampede did, invasion or no invasion. The Saddle Bronc finals happened, the Chuckwagon Championship happened, the mini donut line never got any shorter. At the closing ceremony, Harold Reyes stood near the arena gate, watching the crowd file out one final time, and found himself thinking about the whole strange week, the same way he thought about every difficult shift in his long career. Something unexpected showed up, and the people around him simply handled it because that was what needed to happen. And there was no version of the day where anyone in that stadium considered doing anything less. Somewhere above the atmosphere, a single Dominion sensor buoy remained in orbit, quietly logging Earth's activity for any future consideration. Though Fleet Command had made it clear that consideration was unlikely for at least several generations. The final entry in its log, translated roughly from the original data stream, read simply, "Population resistant. Cultural event ongoing. Recommend alternate galaxy." If you made it all the way to the end of this one, you already know what to do. Hit that like button if Calgary earned it. Subscribe if you want more stories exactly like this one, and drop a comment telling me which moment was your favorite, the rope, the wagon, or the donut tray. Share this with a friend who needs to see Cowboys win one for the whole planet. Thanks for riding along on this one, and I will see you in the next story.